Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. So I've got a very interesting guest. I've got with me Alex. So Alex is a YouTuber from England who makes videos in Mandarin and Cantonese about language learning and his time, in Hong Kong and in Beijing and all that good stuff. So I'll let him do a brief introduction, give a brief introduction to himself, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Luke. Yeah. As he said, I'm from the UK. I'm 26. And I originally started learning languages actually kind of at the start of university. I learned German, and then I had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong, and I picked up Cantonese, and then from there followed Mandarin, and it's kind of been an ongoing adventure ever since then.
Oh, nice. So you did German at university, or was that just like a side thing that you did when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, the backstory is like my mother is German, so I'm half German,
cool.
but she never spoke to me in German when I was growing up. Something I always obviously I did something I didn't really care about when I was a teenager, but as I got older, it's something I really regretted. And I always thought people who could speak other languages were really cool. I remember in university, university was the first time that I went to a really international environment. I went to university in London, and I just met so many people from other countries that could speak other languages, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And that's what kind of started to motivate me to maybe try and pick up a language. And it all started with Duolingo.
Oh yeah, how did that go?
Yeah, it got me hooked on it in a way nothing ever had before, because as opposed to boring textbooks, it was gamifying it kind of. And it was like, in 2013 this was, so Duolingo was still pretty, it was the early days of it. And I remember doing the entirety of German and really enjoying it, and enjoying that feeling like I was progressing. And then just continuing afterwards. And then kind of, you know what it's like. The more results I saw, the more motivated I felt, and it got better and better and better and better. And and I took it at university kind of afterwards, or like on the side kind of thing. But most of my learning I did on my own, which is the way I've always been. I don't really like classes. I got to a fairly decent level, and I took it at university, took advanced German university, and then I had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong, and that's when Cantonese stepped in.
So after you finished Duolingo, then what did you do to like learn it by yourself? What sort of activities were you doing?
That was definitely the hardest bit, and I think that's the problem that most people who start Duolingo have. Like, it's very easy to follow the Duolingo structure, but when you finished it, you feel like you're a lot better than you are, and then you pick up a book or turn something on in German or try and speak to someone and realize that you're actually not very good. It was a mess in the beginning. I remember getting Link, Kaufman's Link, and trying to read stuff very, very slowly.
I used that for Spanish, and Chinese as well, but it was less good for Chinese. But anyway,
but just the grammar was just nightmarish. I still find it nightmarish. And I just watched a ton of stuff. Like, if you type in like documentary in German, like doku on German, there's like a ton of documentaries in German, and I would just binge watch things that I would think are absolute trash. If I was watching in English, I feel like it's a waste of time. But if I'm watching in German, I felt like I was learning something, so it's fine. So I was watching like trash reality TV. And just after hours and hours and hours of exposure, I just slowly started to pick it up more and more. And
so just lots of like listening input and then reading stuff on Link.
Yeah, essentially. And then I got someone, one of the language teachers at my university. I told her about it, and she offered to kind of do 2 hours a week with me speaking in German. So we can kind of continue like that. So I'm just going speaking and lots of input.
That's quite interesting, because I think you did something there that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think of. So I just want to. So most people, when they're learning a foreign language, at least at the beginning, they think, right, I'm going to, at least the mindset that I see some people have is, I'm going to get good, and then I'm going to enjoy watching TV. But it sounds like you were there at the time, well, I'm just going to try and watch it and see what I understand.
Yeah.
And then see if I can pick up more. So I'm wondering what the thought process was like, because that's actually, I mean, it's easy to say now once you get into watching YouTubers and stuff. Like, where did the idea come from? Was that just something you thought, or were you watching other people at the time?
Yeah, I don't think I had many speaking opportunities, and I just wanted the opportunity to try and learn on my own, and that seemed like the most logical step. And I watch a lot of stuff anyway, generally. And in the beginning, it was very, very hard, and it was the same with Cantonese. I mean, it was harder with Cantonese, just because you can turn something on and just not understand, feel like you're not understanding a single word. Yeah. And it was just through pure stubbornness that I would just sit there and try to understand. And eventually it started to yield results, and bits and bobs I'd start to pick up. And it got especially good, and this is the tactic that I later used in Cantonese, when I could watch something in German with German subtitles. And I just would not allow myself to continue watching unless I felt like I understood the entire sentence that was just spoken. So even if that meant pause, look up every single word, write them all down, read it back to myself, make sure I understand it, then play. And it was like a tedious process in which half hour of TV might take 2 hours. Wow. But after doing that, I really felt like every time I did that, my German jumped up a really big level.
See, that's quite interesting. I'd be curious to know, did you do that all the time, or was there times when you just thought, I can't be... So you'd say did that for a bit and then just decided to watch it more relaxed, or was it every time you went to watch German you did that?
In the early days, it was every time, because as soon as I tried to watch it more relaxed, I just didn't understand what they were talking about.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That makes more sense. It's just necessary, and I just felt like, right, this is... I don't know, it felt like I was getting so much more out of it if I did it like that, although it was a bit tedious. It just felt so much more substantive, and I was making 2 hours of language learning count way more than if I was just watching relaxed 2 hours. It's like that active versus passive thing, right? It's easy to sit there passively and listen, but if you're in the early stages, it's just you're not making that much progress. You're kind of conning yourself in a way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I think if you only did the more laid back stuff, in my experience, then you wouldn't get very far. But if you kind of do both, so what I did when I'll just take Spanish for example, because it's like a European language, the same as German. I'd basically take short YouTube videos with the CC subtitles and put it into link and review one of them in the morning. Nice. Go over and look up every single word and listen to it many times. I was listening to it when I was walking to work, and some days I listened to the same 5-minute audio loop, 80 times to and back from work. Whatever. And then when I got off work and I had more time free, I'd just be I'm just going to put on the TV. If a word sticks out to me or seems important, I'll look it up. And then if not, I'll just leave it. And I feel kind of combining the two. So a lot of the ones you'd study in the morning, you'd see up in the afternoon, whatever, when you watch TV.
I mean, it seems like to me you're doing the active stuff, and you're just kind of using the passive to just reinforce what you've done actively. Yeah,
and you do pick up new stuff as well. But yeah, it's quite. I do look up stuff sometimes. It very much depends. It's like a feeling thing. I remember when I was watching Money Heist, I was just like, "What's this word I keep hearing?" It was "joder." So I looked it up, and I was like, "Oh fuck! It's a Spanish word for fuck. That's why that's."
That's why they're constantly saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those eureka moments where you discover a word that kind of you were looking for all along, or you've heard so many times. You're that's what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm curious then. So jumping into Cantonese, you said you tried to do the same thing. I guess there's a few things. You said it was hell at first. Did you?
Yeah, definitely.
Do the same approach of rewinding and listening and?
Yeah, I mean. It came a little bit further down the line, because everything about Cantonese was just so much slower than German. It just took so much more time for me to make any substantive progress with Cantonese than it did with German. Especially it was my first Asian language, so I hadn't tried learning an Asian language before. But with that part of my Cantonese learning came about 3 or 4 months in. It was about 3 or 4 months before I even felt like I could start trying to use that tactic, if you get what I mean. Because the early Cantonese learning was just trying to familiarize myself with the tones, just repeat, I had an audio book thing, just repeat, not book, but audio lesson, just repeating the tones to myself again and again. Just trying to learn.
Or Cantonese class or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just trying to get. I think you mentioned before in one of your videos you use Yuping. I used Yale, So trying to familiarize myself with Yale. So like how you write each pronunciation.
Yeah, I mean, I actually did both because
You did
the
both,
thing with Cantonese is you get a mix of resources that use different things.
Yeah.
Which is really frustrating because you get used to one and then you go, fine. The best beginner resource seems to use Yale because the best one I thought was Teach Yourself. And then you go into like intermediate and it's like, okay, Cantonese Conversations by Ollie Richards is really good. Some other things that also use Yuping. Public dictionaries use Yuping. And I'm like, okay, you're just going to have to learn both and just get up.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, the good thing about Chinese is that there's not so many tones. So it always feels like, not so many sounds rather. So that it feels like you can learn quite quickly the different pronunciations.
Yeah, you mean with Cantonese or Mandarin?
Both, really. I feel like that the amount of different sounds isn't actually that. There's not actually that many different sounds like that you can write out, if you get what I mean. I feel like in English there's a lot more.
Yeah, and I guess if you're reading the Yale or Yuping for pronunciation, it'll be a lot more consistent than if you get two letters next to each other in English. That'll just change depending on what word it's in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which something doesn't really happen in Chinese. But very early on, I started doing lessons online. I was doing lessons online, trying
like
to do
Italki?
within a few weeks.
Like Italki?
Yeah. Before I went to Hong Kong, I was trying to do Italki lessons, and I'm sure you've had them as well in your early days of learning, where you can't say anything almost. You can say the most rudimentary sentences, and their response, you don't have a clue what they said. They have to repeat it 100 times.
I mean, I remember my first lesson. I'd been learning for about a month and a half or 2 months at the time, and I jumped on. And I think I spent a lot of time listening to the dialogues and Teach Yourself and whatnot. And I think I said something, and the teacher was like, "Oh, okay," and was like, "Oh, he must know like a thing or two." And then went to say like, "Oh, Gamla, lei,中意學廣東話." I'm like, 中意咩意思啊? And she just like looks at me like really like perplexed. Like I just said like, "Hi, I'm Luke. I'm a chemical engineer," because that's like the introduction phrase you learn. And then she was like, "You don't know the word for like." And she just looked at me a bit confused for a few seconds, and then was like, "Oh," and just started typing. And I was like, yeah, I probably should have known that, but oh well.
Definitely, yeah.
But the interesting thing is, so after with Mandarin and with Spanish, I kind of took a more input-heavy approach. And when I went to start speaking then, actually, like my first time speaking in Spanish and Mandarin is both on YouTube. And like it's not good, but like I can have a conversation with bad pronunciation on my first time, which is like a lot of that initial pain and stuff is kind of just not there compared to where it was with Cantonese.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, learning Cantonese really does make Mandarin comparatively a walk in the park. I mean, it's not a walk in the park still, of course, but like comparatively, I mean, it gives you such a leg up. I just always felt like I was learning Cantonese again, but with a different pronunciation sometimes.
So what do you think made it harder? I know I've got my answers, but I'll see what you say first.
What made Cantonese harder than Mandarin?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, it was just, I mean, the easiest thing about Mandarin was that I felt like I already had the structure there and I already knew the vocabulary. I just didn't know the Mandarin pronunciation. But, I mean, generally, I find Cantonese harder than Mandarin objectively, I think, because obviously lack of resources being probably the main one. And also just I think it's called diglossia, when like the spoken language and the written language are just so different, and you just don't know what's written, what's spoken, and you feel like they're so like you can't like grab onto it. Like it's not like so many spoken words. You just don't even know. Like the locals don't know how to write in Yale or Yuping. They don't know what the tone is. They don't. A lot of times they don't even know what the character is. You can't even like write it down. You can't like look it up. It's just so like I don't know. It's just so tough. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite about like the writing Cantonese down. It's like some of them probably have characters, but I remember like there's no like standardization. So like my friends in like there's a character for like the D. A lot of people would just use a capital D.
I know it. Yeah.
Like there's characters like hi, hi, and then there's also hi, which is like to be located at. Yeah. And basically, I'll put the characters on the screen if I remember when I'm editing. Basically, it's just they look similar. In Mandarin, it's guanxi de xi, and they literally just there's a mouth to the left of it.
Yeah.
Because it lets you indicate that it's Koyu, that it's Cantonese. But a lot of people, they literally type capital O, sheet, because they'd be typing in pinyin. So they'd like do a capital O and then like the other characters instead of typing the actual thing. And you look at it like, what the hell is that? And then you obviously can't look it up in a dictionary because it's not the legit character.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's loads of other stuff like share, like te, whatever, and like a lot of them they type LOR for like law and like weird stuff like that. Yeah.
But that's interesting. You started learning because all of this stuff, I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's all quite new to me in the sense that I only started learning characters not that long ago. But you learned characters from the very beginning.
No, not exactly. I learned speaking for about 9 months. And then I went through a book called Remembering the Traditional Hanzi by... I always get like scolded online saying I pronounce Hanzi wrong, but I realized where it comes from. I pronounce it like Honzi. I say like Cantonese Z, but it's spelled out Hanzi, so it's spelled out like Mandarin.
Yeah,
so it's spelled out Hanzi, but I pronounce the second bit with like the Z, like in Cantonese.
Z, yeah.
I think I got it from Ollie because I watched his video online.
Maybe.
Yeah, so I went through that and did like 1,500 characters for that about 9 months in, and then started like reading and listening more in Cantonese, like for where the subtitles match up. So there was a book called Wedding Bells made by a publisher called Greenwood Press in Hong Kong. That it's basically like a graded reader. It's just a textbook with 20 chapters based off the diary of this Hong Kong woman falling in love with a Japanese man, and just tells a story in terms of a sequence of 20 diary entries, each about a page long with full audio.
Yeah.
I think they use Yale as well.
Oh, so they use Yale and it's written in oral Cantonese.
Yeah, and then they have at the back of the book, they have it in standard written Chinese for reference, but the actual dialogues are written in Cantonese.
Wow, I would have loved that when I was learning. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that's like, you dig around a bit more and you find a lot of stuff. Like, I think you had a video, I don't know if it was recent, but I watched it recently, that was how you improved Cantonese from like beginner to intermediate, and you recommended watching lots of, was it vlogging type people? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's how I used that German tactic, but in Cantonese, is I watched tons of YouTubers, because that was the only that was my kind of window into the oral language. That's kind of where I found it. And it was just because they're short videos, they're talking about easy stuff, they're talking about going shopping or eating their breakfast or drinking coffee, and it's just so much more tangible subjects, and you can kind of follow onto it quite easily. And especially, from that I found lots of like people who upload like short movies onto YouTube, and then upload like short movies onto YouTube, and then they'll put subtitles down beneath. Sometimes oral Cantonese subtitles. So I just use those and just watch them again and again and again to get in.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, like YouTube is one of the few places that you can find, like spoken Cantonese subtitles. And I have seen posts on there's a dictionary called Canto Dict Online, which I'm sure you've probably used a million times by now.
Million times, yeah. But
there was a forum post on it that mentioned like some of the old Cantonese movies that you bought like before 1997, when it was more like less of an influence from China. Basically, they actually had Cantonese subtitles in the movie things, and you could buy them online. There's something I've never actually looked into, but like there was like a big list of names for films, and I was like, damn, if I ever go to Hong Kong, I need to try and buy one of these and actually check if it has Cantonese subtitles.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll dig up the post, but
I did. That's interesting.
Yeah, I did. There were some like random things like that you see online. Like I believe somewhere on my Google Drive, I don't remember where I got it from, but I was looking the other day and just stumbled across. I downloaded the transcript of Shaolin Soccer in Cantonese, and I was like, when did I get that? I don't remember using this. I don't know why it's here, but it's just there.
Yeah.
And there is like some books written in Cantonese. So there's a website called Hong Kong Golden, which is kind of like a Hong Kong version of Reddit. And there's a storytelling channel, and lots of books got posted on there, like in the story section. There's one called Men Can't Be Poor, Lam Yanam Ho Ye Kong, and it got put into a film. But that's actually written in complete Cantonese, and there's an audiobook also in Cantonese that you can use as well. So that's quite useful. There's like stuff out there like that. which
Yeah. Yeah,
use.
it seems like you did some good research in digging out some good resources. I didn't find any of these.
Well, I was like in the UK the whole time, so I kind of feel that I need to. So I guess for me, what I find difficult is you've got like your beginner stuff and your intermediate stuff or whatever. So like, I'll do my teach yourself. I'll go through like Cantonese conversations, and then I watch a film and I still understand like very little. So how do because the subtitles, even if you know the characters, the subtitles are different to what's being said. Closing the gap between intermediate and to the point where you can understand a like TV show or a drama or a movie is really hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And even
your approach was to that.
Yeah, I mean, even now, sometimes it depends what the movie and TV show is about. I mean, that's the thing with Cantonese with the amount of slang as well. Like if you're watching like a crime drama, like about like the triads or something like that. Even now, there's a lot of stuff that just flies by me, and I do not understand what they say. I feel like that gap can never be completely closed with Cantonese, just because of like the kind of oral nature of the language. Do you not find that?
Yeah, for sure. I remember there was a point I watched a few dramas in a row, and I was like, I rewatched A Fist Within Four Walls. I rewatched both seasons of Triumph in the Skies. I watched, was it My Seventh Day, and someone about boxing. I come up with I forgot the name, but I understood like most of these few dramas, and I was like, I'm like, basically completely fluent. And then I watched Journey to the West, like the 1996 one.
Yeah,
that's really, really good. But I was like, damn, I have no idea what's going on here. Because then it just started like putting in all of these like Buddhist terms and stuff, like. And like fantasy terms and stuff, and like talking about transformations, and I was just like, okay, looks like I've got a little bit left to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also a case of kind of focusing your language learning where you think you're going to, what's going to be useful. So, for example, you're into that kind of stuff. Like for example, someone who's really into football. I don't really like football, right? But if someone who's really into football, they might want to learn, like watch football related stuff, learn a bunch of football related vocabulary so that they can later in conversation talk about football. I couldn't talk about football in Cantonese. I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I could try, but it would be a mess. But for example, I'm quite interested in politics, right? So I watch loads of like politics related content over months and months. And I can have a really good conversation about politics. And I feel like if I'm talking about politics, I'm actually really fluent. But then you switch that around, you talk about like fantasy or something, I wouldn't know where to begin. So I think it's also a little bit of that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And this is something that you appreciate because it's basically what you just explained. And a lot of people don't, is kind of, there's the maybe misconception to people who've not been through the process before or not started the process before, should I say, that it's kind of like fluent is like a binary thing. It's like a light switch, you're either on or you're off, but it's kind of a bit more like I can, there were times when I was in living in Taipei, I did a lot of work for like animal rights. So I learned a lot of vocab relating to how the animal agriculture industry works, maybe some about nutrition and about environmental protection. So I was speaking to people on the street in Taiwan about what happens in the animal industry. Yeah. And then I'd go out to a restaurant at night and they'd be like, do you want a receipt? And mumble it. And I'd be like, 我不懂there. Like, or like you just be like, don't know the word for something like shoelace or like bookcase or something like really common just because it's not come up yet. So it's like, you can do thing A really fluidly, but it doesn't necessarily mean it like knocks on into other areas. I think with things like, and this is the main difference I found between Spanish and Chinese or like Asian languages, I guess, is because in Spanish the roots of the words are the same. So if I wanted to read about like say relating to work, I wanted to read about like cryogenic distillation, which is just basically taking air,
a lot of science words,
turning it into a liquid and splitting it out into its like elements, and it's literally like, I'm probably gonna get it wrong in Spanish, it's something like columna de distillación. And it's like in Mandarin it's different. It's Kong Fen Zhuang Zhi. and you have to like you see the characters and you be like, okay, kung shi de kung, fun ka de fun, or zhuang zhi shi zhuang zhi ba. So I was like, okay, it's like units, but like you have to learn every single one of them. Whereas with Spanish, it's just like you just listen to it and it's like, no, that I know that. Like I read Sapiens in Spanish and it was actually like quite easy just because it was like Sapiens was Sapiens, you know, like loads of the words were just the same.
Yeah. So that must make learning Spanish an entirely different experience that you can like kind of fly by on the English that is on the kind of borrowed common vocabulary, especially because it's going to be a lot of the time it's going to be more complex vocabulary.
Yeah. So it's like it's with Spanish, it kind of seems the more you get in, the things that tend to differ, I believe, are the more colloquial stuff. And it's the same between standard written Chinese and spoken Cantonese. The more colloquial stuff differs, but the technical vocab's the same.
Yeah.
Right? So the more you learn the Spanish, the easier it is to learn because the rest of it gets to a point when pretty much everything you're coming across is cognates. And I didn't get that far with that. I only learned for about half a year, but I started to notice that a little bit. Whereas in Chinese, it feels like the further you get, the harder it gets because it starts to become more apparent. Okay, there's all these Chengyu I don't know. There's all of these cultural references I don't know. I don't know, like even I was speaking to someone the other day, that literally like A Dream with a Red Mansion, they've got people that have a whole university course studying that one book. So it's like how to like capture like the cultural knowledge and the differences just seems to get more like harder the further in you get. I don't know. It's like that feeling.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do know what you mean. It's that the more you know, the more you realize how little you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did it take you, like, if you compare how long, I'm not sure what level you got to in Spanish, but if you compare how long it took you to get to, like, let's say a level in which you could kind of quite like happily converse, how long did that take in comparison to with Cantonese, for example?
So my first time speaking in Spanish is on my YouTube channel. I'll probably find the link and put it down somewhere. And it was after I did 3 months of input, and my first time speaking, I actually had a conversation. My pronunciation was pretty bad, but I could communicate, and I felt, like it didn't feel that difficult. Like I was obviously messing up a lot and have loads of stuff to improve, but I could like have a conversation after 3 months of input. And like I think the difference is, when I first put on Spanish TV and you like have it in the background, you're watching it, you're trying to pay attention, see what you can understand, you're putting the subtitles and you're watching the audio, and that there's a lot of words from day one that the difference is when you put on Spanish TV from day one it sounds like words, whereas like with Cantonese it just doesn't. So I was like half a year in to Cantonese watching the TV show and still probably understanding less than day one on Spanish, just because it's like I've no idea. I'd watch like A Fist Within Fools was my favorite drama, one of these kung fu ones probably at the time, which was really good. And I'd watch an episode and I'd understand like doyumju, be like the only thing I'd understand for the whole episode. And
I completely know what you mean. Yeah. And did you find that Spanish words stick in your memory more easily? Like they're easier to remember than a new piece of vocabulary in Chinese?
Yes and no. Majority of the time, yes, but there's certain times with, especially for idioms with Chinese, the way they work, like when you get better with the characters, I find a lot of the time you see, if you know the characters of a word already and you come across it once, you just stick in your head. So yesterday I was, again, I work in cryogenic distillation as an engineer, so I was reading something in Chinese to do with that, trying to like just see if I can understand anything. And the word cryogenic sounds really like, I don't know, professional in English. In Chinese, it was literally just when, like low temperature. I'm like, okay, cool. I know that now. So like in situations like that, it just seems to stick because the character knowledge is there. Whereas for like other words, if I just listen to something without seeing the characters, I find it extremely hard to remember. There was times when I was watching like an entire TV show and still don't really remember like what all the main characters' names are because I just forget. It just doesn't stick in my head.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I don't know what your experience was comparing it to German.
I mean, I think one thing about me, and I think it's one thing that kind of has made me stick around with the Asian languages. I mean, I mentioned before we started recording, I'm learning Japanese now. And I think one thing that's kept me on the Asian languages as opposed to learning another European one is just the German grammar was just such a nightmare for me. I still don't feel like I properly understand all of it, and I just despise. I think I have like whichever, I don't know if it's right brain or left brain, I forget, but the non-maths one, like the more verbal one. I think I'm very much on that
Right
side.
brain. Right brain. I think it's
Is that
creative.
right?
Left brain is maths, I think.
Okay, right. So I think I'm aggressively right-brained then. And things like grammar and grammar rules and just like getting them stuck into my head and just learning like a table of different, cases and things like that and endings, I'm just so awful at. So I'm much better at, I don't know, that experience kind of cursed me with German, and it's something that I never had to go through with Chinese, because obviously Chinese has like caveman grammar. It's just like so easy. So that's one thing that does stick in my mind as Chinese being a lot easier than German. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's literally just like the word order is similar to English,
Yeah.
and there's no verb conjugations, which mean when you're trying to get hold of it, like there's literally, I think you have to, like, as a beginner learner for Chinese, you probably have to get used to like ba and bei, and that's like more or less for like up to an intermediate level. Really, you okay? Well, just them two. Like if you could, the rest you kind of like see, and like there's stuff like ting jin, ting de jin, and getting used to like the difference between like or like yo ting guo or whatever, like all the like little differences like that, and like sometimes like le is like a bit confusing, but a lot of it you kind of just you can understand as you listen to what they're saying, and it's literally just because a lot of the fact that there's no verb conjugations is just, it kind of makes me think, why is verb conjugations even a thing when it doesn't need to be? Like I didn't even realize that until later.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why Chinese is a little bit of a breath of fresh air, because I obviously hated verb conjugations and that kind of grammar so much. So when I started learning Chinese and I just discovered how the language completely lacks that, that was a big help for me, and a motivator to keep going. I'm someone who'd much rather sit there and memorize 100 new pieces of vocabulary than memorize 3 grammar rules. I hate grammar rules.
Yeah.
Is Spanish very grammar heavy?
Well, I only literally listened. I literally only did input pretty much for half a year because I was kind of a bit Tarzan with the grammar, so I probably completely butchered it. But the main thing that was a bit confusing for me as an English speaker was that they conjugate the verb depending on who's saying it, so they can actually drop pronouns in the majority of situations. So, for example, if I say the word the speakers habla, if I say I speak, you can say yo hablo, or just you can drop the yo because hablo already means that it's me. If it's you, it's hablas. So it's tu hablas, but you don't have to say the tu, you can just say hablas. And that's kind of like the pronoun is in the verb. So you just change the way it's conjugated, and it tells you who's saying it without having to explicitly say who the speaker is. So that it's good in the way that they can convey more information with less words, but it's annoying because it means you have to conjugate verbs based on tense and who's saying it. So it means there's like a lot of different forms, which meant when I use link, you get one root word like habla, and then you just get all the different conjugations of it. It makes your known word count really inflated. So I did it for like 6 months, and I think I got to about 20,000 known words, but a lot of it was like cognates I'd seen once, or just like loads of different forms of the same verb. So it's like really not an accurate measure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can get you.
But yeah, I think with the grammar thing, I don't think that's the reason why I liked Chinese more. I think I've always, from a young age, just kind of liked that sort of thing. I don't know, like when I was younger, I used to watch a lot of like Dragon Ball Z as a kid, which is when I watched Journey to the West. I was like, Dragon Ball full on ripped off this book, but whatever. I always used to watch stuff like Jackie Chan's Adventures or like Round the World in 80 Days and like stuff like this. So like when I realized that Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, Stephen Chow, sort of Ip Man are all from like Hong Kong, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Added motivation to learn.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, because I'm a little bit different. I didn't kind of discover Hong Kong culture and movies and things like that until after I went there. Me kind of falling in love with Cantonese was very much kind of wrapped up in my first experience in living abroad and living in Asia, and I enjoyed it so much just being in Hong Kong and just everything about it, the whole kind of experience. And then the language kind of came hand in hand to that, and the culture, like those kind of cultural elements, like the films and stuff like that, they all kind of came later. But you were learning for ages before you even went there, right?
Well, I never lived in Hong Kong. I basically learned for 2 years at home. I've only been to Hong Kong once for a 2-week holiday when I was about 9 months in, and I put like vlogs on my channel before, like trying to do a challenge where I didn't speak English for 2 weeks, which kind of works just because my girlfriend was like helping me and like using like say baby Cantonese the whole time. But the thing is that I found, where compared to being in Taiwan or Guangdong, because I went to Guangdong on holiday after about 2 years and spoke there, is actually a lot harder sometimes to get Hong Kong people to speak Cantonese compared to other places. I think because they heard me speaking with my girlfriend in Cantonese, a lot of people were like happy to like speak in Cantonese. But if it was just me, they'd be there, I'd like say a sentence and they'd be like, wow, your Cantonese is so good. And I was just like, oh,咁啦，如果你覺得我哋廣東話講得好好嘅話咧，點解你用英文？
係咯，你繼續講啊，你講啊。
你講一下。
Yeah. No, mate, I've faced this problem so many times. I mean, I think it's just a problem of people there just speaking too good English. I've heard it's a similar thing. You go to like Sweden or Norway and you try and speak in Swedish or Norwegian. Their response is just inevitably, wow, your Norwegian's so good. And then they just continue speaking in English. I've been there before. I just, especially after a few drinks, I'll just say in Cantonese, and usually if I say it for long enough, they'll be like,
I've done that before. I've just been there like, no entiendo.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that's something. I think when your Cantonese gets a little bit better as well, you can kind of generally persuade them to speak to you in Cantonese. But as you say, if you've got a third person there and you're speaking to them in Cantonese, then inevitably the other person's going to switch as well.
Yeah. Like when I was in Taiwan, there was a few of my friends that didn't speak English. I went to like some of these events, like not like language learning events, just like random events. And I remember there was this Taiwanese person that went over to speak to me, and she started speaking in English. And then my friend next to him was like, "他的中文很好啊，你可以用中文啊." I'm just like, 谢谢.
Love you.
It's like, yeah. But I remember when I got off the plane, I did that 2-week vlog in Hong Kong, and I literally got off the plane. I was like really nervous, like my first time traveling by myself, my first time trying to speak a foreign language in the real world, like my first time. I think it was the first time in like that part of Asia, like Far East Asia in general. So I was very nervous, and I was just like, "你知唔知道巴士站在喺邊度啊?" And he's just like, "Bro, you know you can speak English, right?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm so crushed."
Just so crushing. Just so
like,
crushing.
Like 9 months of work, and then just like, "Bro, why are you bothering?" But the thing is, I said, 其實咧。我學緊廣東話，所以咧我想學習。And he was like, 好啊，去嗰邊啦。So, but like the thing is, like, actually, when I explained that I'm like, really serious about learning, I really want to learn. That's I've came here to practice, and obviously just see my girlfriend and family. But like, I'm trying to practice as much as I can. I'm only here for 2 weeks, and people are actually like surprisingly receptive, because it's a weird dynamic in Hong Kong. Like, they're all very proud of Cantonese, but they also like to promote, why don't you learn Mandarin instead, it's more useful. There's that kind of weird duality to it. But I think when you actually explain that you want to learn and that you're here to practice, then most people, like 99 times out of 100, they'd be like, okay, sure, then we can speak in Cantonese.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think there's like, it also depends what kind of Hong Kongers you meet as well. Because there's a type of Hong Konger that's extremely international, maybe studied abroad, who has a very international outlook, has a lot of Western friends, and it's just, for love nor money, you cannot get them to speak to you in Cantonese. But then there's probably a larger percentage of the Hong Kong population are actually really local people. who don't really have many Western friends, and their English isn't actually that good, but you just don't really get the chance to meet them so easily. You just, they're not in the same social circles as you. And through making some local friends and friends of local friends, I've managed to kind of meet a few more people like that. And that's kind of flipped it completely. Now it's more difficult to get them to, like, if I bring only English speaking friends along, to get them to speak English rather than to get them to speak Cantonese, because they're just very local. So I really do think it's a matter of who you get to meet.
That's true. Yeah. I remember when I was in Yuan Long, which is in the new territories up north, like near like the border for China. I was in there because that's where my girlfriend lives, so we were like staying like near there, and I started speaking to one of her next door neighbors, and then as it turned out, she was saying to me, she was like, "Wow, I don't speak English, I don't speak Mandarin. This is my first time speaking with a foreigner." I'm just like,
oh, cool.
So no pressure.
Nice, yeah. That happened to me a few times in China. So I'm interested to know, because I've always been interested in these kind of dynamics of, you know, what language you end up speaking with people, and how hard it is to get them to speak to you in the local language. If you compare Taiwan, going to Taiwan and trying to get people to speak to you in Mandarin versus Hong Kong, that was Taiwan significantly easier. Did you find people a lot more receptive speaking Mandarin?
I find it's a really weird mix. So like, I'd go into a restaurant or like 7-Eleven or something, and sometimes people would be there like, "Thank you," or like, "Yes." No, they obviously don't speak very good English, but they're just, you know, doing that. And then sometimes I was near the university and literally had Taiwanese missionaries come up to me, hand me a leaflet in Chinese about God, and start asking me questions about it. So I was just like, there's a weird mix between people who just expect you to and people that assume you can't.
Yeah.
But in general, I think I did find it easier. I think one of the things that made a difference is, especially towards the end of my time there, you know, that my Mandarin is a lot better than my Cantonese. Like when I left Taiwan, I could understand like most of fine. Like I even helped co-host some events for one of my friends, and like I got told just to, you know, just go around and chat to the guests. I was like, yeah, that sounds easy enough. And then when I got there, they handed me a microphone, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. But like, you know, going through events like that and like struggling and, you know, going through it, by the end of the year, I felt like I actually got to like a decent level when I can express myself on a few different topics. So like, because my Mandarin was better level, was a lot better than most people's English in Taiwan, I found it a lot easier. Whereas I feel like if going for Hong Kong people, a lot of them went to university in England, have academic level English, and are basically like native level for all intents and purposes. I feel like I could study Cantonese for 2 decades and be nowhere near their level of English. So I think that's why it would be a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I found that myself when I went to mainland China. Obviously, was there for a year, but probably just a more extreme version of what you found in Taiwan. Because I mean, it's just the opposite case in mainland China. You cannot find someone who speaks English.
Which is good, right?
It was great. I mean, I loved it. Although my Western friends that I was there with didn't love it, and I inevitably end up becoming kind of group translator all of the time. I didn't mind that too much. But yeah, it's a completely different dynamic. Yeah.
See, when I was in Taiwan, actually, most of the like Westerners that I met spoke really good Mandarin, to the point where, yeah, and I think it might just be because I met them in circles of Taiwanese people, so it was kind of like they were putting themselves in that environment, and I wasn't really going to like bars and drinking that much, so it was probably the environment where I was, or I met them at the MTC, which is basically a Chinese language school, so it was probably because of that. But I remember one of my friends, one of my best mates from Taiwan, well, he's a Geordie, he's originally from Newcastle, and anyone's not British and doesn't know what Geordie is. And because when we met, we were like both going to these same like vegan related events in Taiwan. I was like, okay, we just spoke in Mandarin because that's what everyone else was doing there. And then a few months later, he went round to my house for a few drinks with some of my like course mates, and my housemates were there. They were like Canadian and stuff. And he started speaking English, and I was just like, wait a minute, why do you sound so Geordie now? This is just weird. You didn't before.
Yeah,
it's quite funny.
Yeah. It's always weird how the accent doesn't necessarily translate into having an accent when they speak the language. I've got a Scottish friend who I can't detect any Scottish accent when he speaks Mandarin. He sounds like a Taiwanese person, but then as soon as switch to English, the heavy Scottish accent. I don't know why that is.
Cool. Yeah, okay. That is weird, but anyway, I guess try to get more on topic to language learning.
Yeah.
So where would you say you are now with your Mandarin and Cantonese? I know we spoke a little bit about it before, but obviously, like, there's always going to be more you can learn. I have lots of points that I need to improve with my Mandarin, even more so with my Cantonese. So it's, pretty beyond rusty at this point. So where would you say you are, and what are your like plans for where you want to go in the future with it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think about it quite a lot. I think the biggest kind of area that I can improve on, and that will, seep down into my oral Chinese improving as well, would be kind of my reading.
Mm-hmm.
I learned characters when I started learning Mandarin, and then since going to Hong Kong, I started picking up the Cantonese characters just through texting, essentially. And I've never sat down and read a book. Sometimes I'll read the news in Chinese, but most of my Chinese kind of written, my kind of is essentially through texting with friends. So I really do want to sit down and kind of learn more characters, and I think the best way for me generally to get better at kind of reading Chinese is just to sit down and really give some effort into reading a book. And I just haven't got there yet, because I know that will seep down into conversation. There's so much vocabulary in the written language that I'll be able to use orally, but yeah, I just haven't got around to it. I think that's still my big area.
Yeah, I found it really helpful with vocab as well. For me, Cantonese is just everything, to be honest, so I'm not even going to go there. But for Mandarin, it's probably easier. That's what I'm actively studying at the moment. Pronunciation's a big one. Like, I've been planning on doing like a series shadowing at some point. I want to improve my writing. Sorry?
Yeah, I've heard that shadowing thing before. I've heard other language learning people talk about shadowing. What is it? Very, very briefly. I don't even know what it is.
So shadowing is basically where you listen to audio from a native speaker. You like choose a parent. So because we're guys, you choose like a Chinese father or a Taiwanese father that you want to try and sound like. You listen to a lot of their videos, and then you basically listen and speak to try and see and compare how you sound to them.
Yeah.
A lot of people. There was a video done by Matt vs Japan a while ago who basically showed us his setup that he used, where he used a Blue Yeti microphone, which is that microphone that I've got here.
Okay.
You can plug like the normal like audio jack in the bottom, and then put headphones in. So basically, as you speak into the microphone, you get real feedback with like how you sound. Like not like, because when you don't really realize how your voice sounds when you speak until you hear it back on the recording. So the idea is you put the headphones in, you get real time feedback. So what you can do is you can put like a headphone in here, and then put like your other headphones on top, so you can kind of listen to yourself and the next speaker in real time and compare, and try to like sound like them. There's one other method called chorusing, which is similar, which is basically the same thing, but instead of doing it with the whole videos, you basically pick like 20 sentences and just do it repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again. So for example, the YouTuber Lao Ma, I don't know if you heard of him, did that.
Yeah, I have.
And he speaks very good pronunciation Mandarin, like extremely good pronunciation. So they're two things that I'm thinking of trying at some point.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because I mean that's definitely one in terms of Cantonese. That's one area that I always think I can improve on, is my pronunciation and my tones. I think I still sound very guilo when I speak Cantonese.
Yes.
And I suppose you must have encountered it as well, that problem of, you can speak both Cantonese and Mandarin. So you always it's got a little bit better these days, but you're always getting mixed up as to what tone is, especially if they're a similar word in Cantonese and Mandarin, you'll use the Mandarin tone, the Cantonese one, the Mandarin one.
For months I said in Mandarin, I'd be like, it's 如果, like second. I'd always say 如果.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what? Wait. But actually, I was speaking to a guy called Ash from Outlier Linguistics, and I'll send you the picture later.
Yeah.
Because he studied a lot about paleology and the origin of tones and the origin of where sounds come from, and he's been studying Chinese for like 3 decades, basically. But there's actually almost like a mapping between where the Cantonese and Mandarin's tones split off from. So he's like, if it's this tone in Mandarin, 90% of the time it'll be this tone in Cantonese. And he's actually drew it out in a diagram for me and sent me a picture, so I can send that to you.
That sounds amazing. I would like that a lot. Yeah, no, definitely. I've always been hoping there would be some kind of fast rule to that, or some kind of rule of thumb that you could use, but I've never been able to find one.
But like some you pick up, I guess. Like sometimes you'd be like, okay, well, like the K in like Cantonese sometimes goes to like a G sound in like Mandarin or something like that. I think. Da was it Dai Koi or Da Gai?
Da Gai and Da Koi. Yeah.
And stuff like that. There is a few things like that you kind of pick up naturally, but with tones, I find I didn't even realize that would be a thing until he mentioned it, and I was like, oh, okay. So he says he has like a little sequence that he goes into in his brain when he switches between the two.
Nice, yeah, nice. Yeah. You could continue. Sorry, I interrupted you. What other ways are you looking to kind of improve?
Well, the other weak points is just generally my vocab is like quite limited. Well, I mean, it's good in terms of like comparing to other like Westerners learning Chinese, but compared to like, you know, a Taiwanese person, it's still lacking so much. So especially like for like more technical stuff like scientific words, I don't know most of them, you know. Politics I couldn't talk about, but I don't really want to, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
History I want to learn more about. I can speak very high level about kind of like the order of the dynasties and what happened and stuff with people, but not in any sort of detail. What else? I've started learning classical Chinese. That's needs a lot of work as well.
Really? Why? What's your motivation? That's great. I mean, but what's your motivation for learning classical Chinese?
Well, there's a few things, I guess. It was always on my radar for a few reasons, because I wanted to because I always quite liked history and philosophy. So I was always curious to attempt to read things like the Tao Te Ching or like Zhuangzi, Laozi sort of thing, or like learn more about Kongzi, or like there's like the old texts in history that I thought would be really cool to be able to read, stuff like that. But also it's the fact that like a lot of Chengyu or just idioms come or are written in classical Chinese. So, you know, like the if a journey for 1,000 miles starts beneath your feet, that grammar is classical Chinese.
Okay.
If you look at the characters.
Yeah. No, it does make sense.
Stuff like that. And also when you watch in Mandarin, at least, I don't know about Cantonese because I couldn't tell because I wasn't that good, but the older dramas, like the historical dramas, like the Gu Zhuang Zhu and the Wu Xia dramas, a lot of the time when they speak, they use kind of like half classical, half Baihuawan. And the same with like some of the novels, like Jin Yong, Wu Xia novels, he uses a lot of classical in that, not like fully, but like kind of like half and half. And then there's books, you know, like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West. I would love to read Journey to the West in the original. I think that would be like the coolest thing ever. So yeah, there's a few things like that kind of instigated. But basically, when I started watching more historical dramas and like the wuxia dramas, I thought, especially when you have the scenes in the court where like the people I couldn't understand much of what was going on, so I learned a bit of classical and it helped a lot.
Really? Okay. And is it very difficult? Because I've heard from mainland Chinese people that a lot of them have to learn it in high school.
Yeah, they do. I mean, this is a textbook that I used. It's just lucky that it's next to me by chance. Yeah. Nice. But when you first start, I'd recommend. I mean, this book's quite good because let me see if I can find a chapter. There's a few things that I find difficult about it, but the first few chapters have like translations in Mandarin, like modern Chinese. So the really texts like that and they always write. And you can see that they always write like down, like that and vertically. So I think the few things that I find hard is one, they use less characters when they write, so it's more information dense. So whereas something would probably use say 10 characters in like modern Chinese, I could write it in like 5 in classical. So if you're listening to it in a drama and the subtitles aren't there, my brain can't keep up. I need the subtitles. The other thing is that there's a lot of characters that when it just goes to just the one, it's more open for interpretation, which one it means depending on the context. So the perfect example, which is used in modern Chinese, is, like, 为了 to 那个 wei.
Yeah.
Well, that can either be second or fourth tone, depending on whether it means for or, like, or sure. Like, sometimes it means sure if it's in, like, a more formal context, and then the tone goes up. There's lots of examples like that in classical Chinese where the meaning changes depending on the context. They've got multiple words for, like, you and stuff like that, and they use different ones depending on how formal they are, who you're speaking to and stuff. So there is,
It sounds like it always sounds closer to Japanese than modern Chinese.
I don't know.
Especially with the formality that you mentioned, and I feel like that open to interpretation thing about certain words is something that I've encountered. Like, some extent.
Well, I guess it's like ni and nin in Mandarin, right?
Yeah, true. But I mean, like, ni and nin, always seems like something left over from. Like, I mean, it is used still today, but it seems like the only thing still left in Chinese that has that kind of formality aspect.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about Japanese to comment, but. Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe
that's where it came from, because obviously the Hanzi were taken over and used as kanji a long time ago. So maybe it was influenced back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt like there's a room to a lot of interpretation. Also, the thing is, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, if you take a lot of texts, you have to know a lot about, like, the historical context of what was going on at the time. So, most native speakers, if you wanted to read something like the Tao Te Ching, which is like the Taoist book for philosophy that they used, I think, was it done by Lao Tzu? I think probably. Someone's going to correct me in the comments. Was like, if you get a native speaker read that, they won't know really how to interpret a lot of it unless they have a modern translation. And actually, scholars debate the meaning a lot. So it's kind of like a lot of stuff depends on context that's no longer there, and you have to, like, debate the meaning. But, like, just generic texts. I find it's just more information dense, and they all go to single characters.
Yeah.
So it's just one, and then it means it's more open to interpretation. That's what I find hard about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actually as hard as I thought. Like, at least I'm only reading, like, simple stuff from this book at the moment. Like, there is some texts. Actually, there is one thing that I should say, and I don't want to talk for too long, but, like, there'll be text from, like, Zhuangzi or something in here. I'd read it, think I understand what it means, and then my teacher would be like, right, so what do you think it means? And I tell her, and she's like, no, that's wrong. I'm like, okay. And that's happened, like, more or less every single time. I think I understand the concept, but what they're trying to, like, show, and I just don't.
Sounds really hard.